It's been a little while since I had the opportunity to sit in front of someone that I respect quite as much as today's guest. Oh, Turiya Hanover is in some ways quite hard to describe, not least because the number of credentials that she has behind her from the perspective of therapy, coaching, counseling, gestalt. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And before we started recording, she gave me a little insight into what her year looks like. And it's effectively a tapestry sewn together of a training that she delivers in this European country on this theme, and then another and another and another. And so I would imagine that across the collective of men and women that she supports and works with and weaves with, we're talking somewhere in the thousands. I also know from everyone who has touched into her space that they leave profoundly changed. And although I've only known Turiya for 6 months, the first day that I was in her presence, I realized that I had met my new teacher, which was a very profound moment for me, having been searching for one for a couple of years. You never really know when that moment or that experience is going to land. How I met Turiya, we're going to talk about. She is the co-founder of an organization called The Path of Love. It does what it says on the tin. And I was lucky enough to go on a retreat hosted by them earlier this year, which utterly changed my insides. We're not going to go into a huge amount of detail about it because actually the process is confidential. The way that the students are held is sacredly secure. But what I would say is that for those of us that are intrepid enough to go into an experience with that as the title, there is something deeply beautiful and deeply unnerving about finding the parts within yourself that have been divorced from your own love, affection, tenderness, connection with others, divulging them, and being given such an incredibly safe, beautiful space in which to explore, gently piecing and melting yourself back into wholeness. I don't want to say anything more because I'm going to be asking Turiya all sorts of questions. But my love, give us your voice and let us know how we find you today.
Well, thank you for welcoming me so lovingly, and I'm very happy to sit here and meet with you. We already had a bit of a chat, and we can just go away. I'm very, very honored to be here, and thank you.
It seems to me, from what I know about you biographically, you have been walking this path from a very early age, no? Have you always been someone that's been inspired by the deeper questions?
I did, yeah, I did from very early on. Partly to be born in after the war in Germany, to be born in a collective wounded situation, so you're born into a field of a lot of conflict and unsaid trauma. My parents had trauma, and my grandparents, I mean, my grandparents were in 2 world wars. My mom only in one, but just born into a trauma field, of really perpetrators. Yeah, and I remember many, many years, I was like, when I went to travel to England and they ask you, where do you come from? And you say German, you go like, you want to die of shame, because of the whole Jewish situation and the camps. And that is such a strong feeling of my early years. It's like this. And I always had a good connection with the Jewish people. I saw these photos and pictures. I was like, wow, why is nobody talking about it? My parents didn't, my grandparents didn't, nobody did. They just wanted to build up, and have a house and have material possessions.
And so this sharing theme becomes then pivotal. And actually, if I think about what I know of your work, the cathartic capacity to speak of what has been unspoken, that feels like a core tenet of what you do.
Yeah, that's one of the strong things of very early feeling overwhelmed with a situation that I was not really ready for, And then plus my parents separated before I was born, so I had to live with my mom, and then I had a stepfather. So I didn't know, did I belong to this family or to that family? So it was, I started with an unstable ground that made me leave home very, very fast. I went to boarding school with 13, and that was it. I just wanted to get out.
I relate to that feeling. When I was 12, 13, my fantasy actually was to go away to boarding school. And I think what you're touching on there is really critical, that when your externals have felt unsteady or unstable or beyond your control, there's that sort of fight flight desire to escape the situation and to dream of a brighter, more creative, more beautiful life, something over there. The over there must be better than the right here. But for me, certainly as well, was that then tendency to internalize in a way that isn't useful, to go inwards, to stay in the environment that you have to be in, to go inwards, but it never felt for me as though that going inwards created more self-intimacy or more connection. It was a sort of a hiding, and we were talking about this before we started the recording, a sort of selective dissociation from the parts of me that really couldn't be visible even to me. So when you're not expressing externally, my experience is also that there's just not that much visibility of you to you either.
Well, I always felt like I don't belong, and I want to belong always, and I don't belong. So I always, from early on, there was always like, I don't belong here, and yet where do I belong? Of course, I got married, and then I felt I belong there, but also only half, because the family didn't really accept me. So there was also that not belonging is always part of my life, but it comes out of a fight and flight. You run away from a situation in one way, but in another way, it's also, I'm happy I left. So something new could happen, some new, a whole new canvas opened up by being in boarding school. You have other kids, you get to know other children from other countries, and instead of just your parental bub, you know. So I
Maybe,
always had that feeling of expansion. I'm a bit like that.
maybe that's the case then, that if you don't have a one anchor, that it goes hand in hand with a discovery seeking quality in a human being.
Yeah, and only also knowing that in order to walk my path, you have to individuate. You have to get away from the norm, whatever your parents think is right. My grandparents, my grandmother, who I love dearly, but still it was like package. And I was like, "No, it's not my thing. But it's quite difficult because you, as a kid, you don't know where you belong to. Deep loneliness and stuff like that. I always remember that. Kind of disconnected from my inner being, of course. A longing for something else. I always thought there must be something else here.
Did you know at the time what that something else was?
Well, I had my first meeting with an enlightened person was a book of Ramana Maharshi. And there was this thing when he was like 15, 16, he was lying somewhere and he was in some kind of state and he had a snake walking all over his body. And I was like so fascinated. I thought, that's how I want to be. So if a snake would run over me, I would be completely fearless. Yeah, I was terrified of snakes
Has
my
it happened?
most of my life until I lived in Australia. Then there were so many snakes, so I had to settle with them and find peace with them. But that was my very first thing. And I thought, well, there is a state of being that is beyond fear. And fear is one of the strong feelings I always have. There's a certain hyper-vigilance, or I have a certain, you have to be ready for anything. Yeah, I know that very well.
I was just thinking about how many, myself included, how many women I know function really effectively in the world. High achieving, build businesses, are the spearhead of the family, and actually the vast majority of them are walking around with that sensation that you describe. It's like it floats slightly underneath the surface. An old friend of mine used to say, they used to talk about the fact that when you wake up, that fear has already woken up before you've woken. And so you arrive to it in the morning. And I wonder actually if it links to what you were saying about belonging, that if from an attachment perspective you have not felt as though you had an anchor and you felt that the world was swirling and the floor was unsteady underneath you, perhaps that does just create this external hypervigilance to check everyone in the environment and check every facet within your ecosystem to make sure that you can see this is how it is, therefore this is how I have to be.
It's a bit like that, not to have a ground that you can land in, and that makes you hypervigilant. Also, my stepfather was very choleric and very angry, and I was always afraid of what's next, So I run away many times, so thank God. But that hypervigilance is often with me. It's a certain panic, a certain fear. That's where I go first, and then I go, okay, everything is okay. Look around, nobody is jumping in you, all is fine. Yeah.
It's quite reassuring to know that, in a way, to know that it's just part of your makeup. Because I think so many of us spend so much time trying to iron out or improve on the things that we consider to be irritating or inconvenient. I mean, certainly for me, I am irritated by the degree to which that it's a feeling for me. It's a very embodied feeling of watchfulness. My nickname was the Watchful Fox. It's that. It's like, where are the headlights? And when I'm in a strong, capable, centered place, I find that part of me annoying because I'm cognitively aware, as you say, that there's actually nothing, there's no fear. I am the agent of my existence. I have community, but it does still come up quite quickly for me.
Or it just is early trauma also, it's just something that happened that is beyond your control, and you didn't have enough safety to. Anyway, I didn't have that landing place, so I had to work for that. But it also made me move into new areas and new spaces, Thank God I didn't stay home. I didn't miss much. I was like, okay. I've been always like that. And that also gave me I mean, it needs a certain amount of suffering. So you want to look at yourself, Otherwise, you don't do anything.
Yeah, if it's too comfortable, you just stay. I mean, because obviously, why would you move? A friend of mine calls that leverage. He always asks when we're thinking about the goal that you have, what's your leverage? What's your lever?
Yeah, exactly like that. Certain things stay with you. And then my grandfather died when I was 6 or something like that. And of course, in those days, they tried to keep it away and you shouldn't go there and blah, blah. But then they had the great idea that I should be with my grandmother, and they put me half a year into the South German part of Germany anyway, where they have a different starting of the year. Plus, they spoke such heavy Bavarian accent. I didn't know what was going on in school. I was really like, Jesus, I don't speak accent German. I speak normal German. So, and then I had to sit with my grandmother, who was sitting in the corner. It used to be a big house with servants and a chauffeur and stuff. And suddenly everything was gone. She was sitting in the corner and just crying and crying and crying. And that was like for 6 months. And we had to go to the cemetery every day and put flowers down and da 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 da. So that left a big impression on me, also of isolation and loneliness and helplessness towards my grandmother, who was, of course, totally devastated by the death of her husband.
One of the themes that we had, you and I, to talk about today, which is related to what you've just been sharing, is this duality of the human experience where, we spend a lot of time either being in collective shared space or wanting to be. Either you're in the receipt of it or you're in the yearning for it. And one of the beautiful things about Path of Love for me was the degree to which I was companioned as I walked the path of my own darkness and light. And I know that in your teachings, being able to be with both of those is critical. It's critical to human health, is critical to peace, is just fundamental to the human experience. We can't evade it. And I remember during this particularly tender moment, it was the sort of post-climactic moment for me. I had shared a lot. I had allowed myself to get incredibly angry. And then I was in what I discovered is the sweet spot after that, where you rage and then you cry, and then you're not dormant, but you're restful for the first time, for me, for the first time in a long time, because so much has been expressed and released. But I remember you saying to me, that there comes this point where you sort of can't avoid the fact that being alone, not necessarily loneliness, but being alone is a fundamental aspect of being alive. And when I learned a little bit about your story and the passing of your husband and all of these things that have happened in your experience, I've just been so aware of change in your life, change again and again and again, and being in companionship and connection, and then having to move into, oh no, it's me now. And it's me navigating, almost like you described with your grandmother, it's me navigating the aftermath, the echo of having lived and loved with another human being. And that statement of Anthea, essentially, Anthea, you need to get used to being alone, which was not what you said, but it was what I needed to hear. And what I did hear became quite a profound takeaway of my time with you. And I wonder if for anyone that's listening that certainly navigates and maybe is challenged by that question of aloneness, the yearning for connection and yet the discomfort of being with self. I wonder if you might speak to that on the basis of your experience.
Big question, because on one hand, today, through the internet and through the iPhone and all these kind of things, people have a certain so-called closeness, but inside you don't really connect. So people actually feel very isolated, you know. And I always feel that in people there's that pain of isolation, because you want to connect, but you don't know how to be real, how to be honest, how to share your feelings. You know, we don't share feelings. We just go blah, 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 blah on top of everything. You know, we try to be perfect function. And I think that is that one thing. And then on the other hand, then you have when people had trauma, when something is too much too soon, too fast, then people go and they dissociate. We hide in places. We go into some, you know, some other worlds where we live. We disappear. We separate from ourselves. And then we're not really with ourselves anymore either. And then we're in that unbearable loneliness. What is not really a loneliness, it's a loneliness because we actually long for connection, but connection is not safe. Connection is not safe enough, it's not holding, it's not loving enough for somebody to be there. So then that dissociation, then many people take into meditation also. You know, they make a meditation out of it, and then meditation is the one and only thing, but it comes out of that isolated space. And my work here has been to really, especially as women, to come into an inclusiveness. I think we women have so much to offer if we dare to feel into our bodies, into our feelings, and into who we really are. Not this way, but this way, you know? And I think that's very, very difficult for women to be inclusive. You know, we don't want to be, we're just trying to be dissociated in meditation, getting away from the trauma, yeah, from the abuse that happened to, of course, to men and women, but to women way more. You know? And my work is really to dare to be with yourself and appreciate who we are, and to come out of that dissociation takes time, and it takes a sensitivity, and it takes love, and it takes the only thing that really, what I think that really heals trauma is connection. You know, if there's somebody there, we all had trauma, but there was nobody there to say, hey, how are you? You know, you were alone, lonely. Yeah. So once you hold people and you say, hey, I'm there with you, no matter where you go, I'm here, then the healing happens. The healing happens in the connection.
Yeah, it happens in the relational space.
Yeah, because that is where we get hurt, in the relational space. I don't get hurt when I'm alone in the woods. I get hurt because my mother, my father, whatever, you know, my husband died, and all these kind of, it's always in the relational space we get hurt.
You were making me think of how tempting it is to distrust. And as you say, when we go into isolation, so when we go into meditation, rather, a lot of the time, it's what you're describing, that because we are fundamentally not trusting other people and not trusting the world, the narrative has become, I will do this myself because I'm the only one that is vaguely reliable or vaguely trustworthy. And so it's not actually in some ways a choice. It's an adaptive choice. It's the choice that we've made from the circumstances that we consider to be possible, but a much, in some ways, more potent choice, or a much more healing choice, or a much braver choice would be, can I lean into the fabric of other human beings? And I've only had that in my life. I've had the opportunity to do that twice, where it's become really clear to me that there is an offering of love from a group of people that I would never have considered myself to be similar to or able to rely on. And it happens in structured experiences where that's the intention and the ethic is what you're describing. I presume that the other trainings that you lead are very similar to Path of Love in that sense. It's a huge amount of intentionality that goes into them, particularly to support people with their own trauma, but also the trauma that's been carried down through generations.
I mean, there's one thing, you have to work on the trauma, you have to work on the dissociation, and that comes through generation and grandmothers and it's really a huge burden we carry. So you work with that. But the healing from the trauma only, in my idea, in my experience, always happen once we have contact with somebody who we trust. And that person for that moment is there and says, I'm here. And in that moment, you can open up to another human being in a positive way, not in the negative way, as most of us have experienced. So I think that's the relational is the key, one of the keys for healing trauma in ourselves. But of course, you have to do all the other work as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you
No,
can't.
it's not just like somebody comes and says, I love you. No, you have to also deal with the impact and what it does to your body and the dissociation it happens, yeah. Through trauma is so intense. And I mean, so many people they're just not here. It's you're dissociated functioning and doing your work. You do, but you're functioning. You're not really in your humanity, you're not really present here. And that is the work. For me, that is what it takes commitment, it takes incredible amount of courage, and you got to be interested in who am I really.
Yeah. It's like you were describing earlier, it takes that motivation, that leverage. And sometimes the leverage is a bad thing has happened and it's shocked me so much that it wakes me up. It takes me from not being here. I remember you saying to me actually once during Path, don't disappear. You said it to me when I was in the process of dissociating and disappearing. You're like, don't disappear. And at the time, you really, for those that can't see what I'm doing, I'm clapping my hands. You made the physical touch between us stronger because it meant that I couldn't go anywhere. I could feel you so palpably that I was aware that I was in the present moment and I was awake and I was alive and I was here. And it was a really good lesson for me in it's in therapy, in counseling and coaching. I think so much of the time, even as practitioners, we can think what we need is to be just soft and loving and caring to the person that we're working with. And sometimes that reminder of rigidity and strength, something to meet, was actually more loving because it's more stabilizing in some ways.
It is. You don't just, it doesn't matter if it's loving or not. It's just that you're present, that somebody is there, you know. Before there was nobody there. You were left alone. You were
Mm.
on your own. That's it. We all experience trauma, but most of us were left on our own. It's like, yeah, you deal with it by yourself. So what? We didn't even know how to ask people for it because you just try to survive. You just try to make it okay. Yeah. But I think the connection is so, so, so important. And that's also where good therapy comes in or a good friend comes in. If you then stay alone, alone, alone in your little apartment somewhere in New York, it's not going to heal the trauma. It might be an experience though.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
then you have the meditation, they're saying, yeah, you have to be alone, you have to meditate, don't waste your time with other people. So there is the spiritual side then, yeah. You know what I mean? So then a lot of trauma is sitting in that spiritual disconnection.
yeah. Although I also think that what happens sometimes in meditation, ideally this happens, is that you're also connected to the living unity of everything. For me, when I drop deeply in, it's not a loneliness feeling at all. I don't feel alone. I feel a significant and insignificant part of kind of everything that I can feel and see and touch.
Yeah, I agree. I love meditation. It's my saving grace. I have to sit every morning but it's not meditation, it's just be with that inner space, who I am, whatever I want to call it. But what I'm trying to do is not cut off from the feelings. I think we cut so much off from feelings, and trying to be in meditation. But I think it's important to let the feelings be there, and it's always this inclusive movement, what I feel for myself, and what I think is actually more natural to women.
Did you find, I'm curious on that topic of feeling your feelings, did you find that you went on your own path of going from a space where you didn't feel your feelings or you weren't able to hold them or regulate with them to being able to express them? Because it's certainly the expression of them, the validation of them, the guttural satisfaction in getting something inside out. That is something I associate with you. But I wonder if that was something that was difficult for you, you went through your own journey with.
Well, of course, in the 70s, we did a lot of emotional expression. Those were the 70s, you encounter groups and screaming, and it was just part of that. But I don't think I really, really touched a deeper place inside of myself. Partly is you do what everybody else does. It took me a long time to really come to that hidden place inside. It's something that's quite
Mm.
like that. It takes a while.
It's intimate. It's very intimate.
Very intimate. When my daughter was born, I felt it. Suddenly, I felt wow, and that opened up a whole door because there was this beautiful being suddenly there, and then suddenly I was like, wow, where you have to love this being unconditionally, but I felt like I don't have unconditional love. I have a lot of. I was very young and I was very unworked.
Mm.
Yeah, so I could feel my limitation. And that's when I also started to go into therapy and look at myself. Just suddenly then I looked at my own mother and my family. And so it opened up my own unfinished business.
I had such a similar conversation with a beautiful person that I met a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about his child. And I haven't got children, and I don't know if that's in the path for me. I would love for it to be, but I kind of wait and see. But one of the things we were talking about was how for people who are very of feeling, I would generally describe myself as someone with a lot of feeling. Nevertheless, the flip side, the positive side of that for me is that I can tune in very quickly to the person that I'm with. Maybe it's the same hypervigilant tendency just turned good as a coach and a therapist, so who knows. But when we were sitting together, we were touching on the tender vulnerability of suddenly being aware that the amount of love that you have is almost unbridled in its volume. That, oh my God, there is so much. I don't quite know what to do with it, and B, I'm sort of scared by the capacity that that would have to take me somewhere that currently feels outside of the bounds of my experience or control. I'm reminded of that as you talk about your daughter. I often wonder also what that would be like to fall deeply, deeply, deeply in romantic love. Because I'm aware that, for a lot of people, they touch a certain extent of that. But then because of the boundarying and the keeping others away that you've been referencing, we do hold ourselves back.
Of course, we do hold ourselves back. And I certainly have been more like a codependent type for many, many years. I was just unworked female situation. And so I gave my love to you, and that's just what you do. You give yourself away, and that's how you have significant by giving yourself away to the other, by being loving and nice and friendly and da 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 da. You don't look at all the other side. I was very codependent, super codependent. So, I mean, but I think it's in all women, it's how we're brought up. I serve you, and of course it makes you a good therapist because you always look for what's happening out there, but you you forget about what's happening here. So when we then started Path of Love, it's like, you have to really feel your own feelings. You have to be honest with your own feelings. Of course, I felt that before in many years. I did all kinds of groups, but not to that extent, where it is tied in with the spiritual opening that happens in Path of Love also, where you have that longing, you want to come home, or you want to find out who you really are, or you want to be at peace in this world, or you want to really be able to love. What a huge, huge task that is, no? I thought like, wow. And then your partner dies, and then you're suddenly, oh, Jesus, how we're going to come to terms with that, you know? Death always, it always has been such a strong teacher for me, and I mean, uncompromising truth. No matter how long you live together or how happy or unhappy you are, one day it's going to be over, you know?
I mean, I almost want to ask you, how did you navigate that? And I know that the answer will not be a simple, I did this and this.
No, it just it always leaves me. Of course, it puts me into shock. You know, it puts me into, because it's so beyond whatever my mind can comprehend. You know, of course, we talk about the eternal. You know, I lived in a meditation community in India, so I mean, meditation it's very close to my heart. But when it happens, suddenly that person that you love is gone, and I mean, it's the most bizarre thing that happened. And then how to ever overcome that. And I think I went into shock for quite a long time, you know, even though it was a very beautiful burning and funeral. It was very, very held and very celebratory. But inside of me, I think I was in shock. You know, it's like how to come to terms with that. And then it takes me years to come out of that shock because I'm anyway that kind of I go like that. And then woof.
And you're still functioning this whole time. I'm imagining you're still doing the doing of life and you're still teaching and supporting and
You do
serving.
your thing, you go on. Of course you go on, you know, but inside something is like, and I don't even know if that ever really recovers, but it's just something that you never forget. So often when I leave somebody who I love behind, it's always like, have you said everything? Do you have unfinished business? And oh, it's such a big calling, you know, to really realize that. And then I understood the Buddha story that when he saw the first man dying on the street, that's when he stopped everything and went to find out who am I really, you know, left everything behind and said, no, I need to focus on something else. And that's what death does to me too. It's like I look inside at what doesn't die, you know, what in me doesn't die. The body will go. I'm anyway at an age, the body will go, my mind will go, you know, the whole thing will go. And then what will stay? And for me, it's a big question. I don't know how people cannot see that. I never understand how people can just overlook that because it's such a strong, we live and then we go, we die, you know. It's a reality. People pretend as if tralala, everything is fine, you know, make money and blah, 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 whatever we do. But like, hello.
Yeah. Can we be okay with things ending?
Yeah.
I don't think I was taught about death, not properly. I wasn't taught about it as an intellectual practice, like really thinking about what does this actually mean and what is the ripple until I was in my 30s. And I had, as you say, I had seen people die and I had felt what you would feel for people that you love passing. But also in the UK, I think maybe different to the experience that you had with your husband, I wasn't aware of the deep, deep, deep ceremonial celebration and sanctity of the passing of a life. There's something that you're making me think of throughout this conversation so far, which is the preciousness of all of it. You know, that idea of, have I said everything that I would want to have said? Have I left things on an unkempt note? Am I treating this one ripe day as though this is the day that could matter? And it sort of takes us maybe into one of the themes that we knew we were to talk about, which is both acknowledging reality, but also deciding on some level, how do I choose to digest this reality or respond to this reality? I just wonder how many people are living in active choice and how many people are living not in active choice.
Well, I don't know. I think it's I don't know, it takes a lot of time and sensitivity to come out of the dissociated space, you know. And for me, death is the biggest guru there is, it's wake up time. It's like, don't waste your life. Don't waste your life with things that are so irrelevant. We spend time with such stupid things. For what? For what? You Even if you have a love affair, at least have something that is full on, not just like, that's my life.
Well,
But
we're gonna bear that in mind for your next 5, 10 years. Turia's love affairs are gonna be spicy and worth her time. If I was to put you on the spot and I was to ask you, relative to that theme, the things that actually matter rather than the frippery of life, what are the things that really feel as though they matter to you from this vantage point that you're in now?
well, from here now, of course, my work is important to me. It's also a way I feel like I'm here because that's what I have to do. That's my work. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. Was kind of in my years right now. And then other than that, for me, it's just to appreciate a certain ordinariness. I love being here, and then you sit in the water and the rain and the sun and the moon and being connected to life in a very, very ordinary way. I love that Zen thing always. It's a certain it's a certain ordinariness. There's nothing special about this life. It's just no big hoo-ha, hoo-ha, hoo-ha. Yeah. So I love that ordinariness. I just moved from my room in Mallorca, and I reduced everything to 7 boxes. And everybody is like, "Oh, how did you do that? 7 boxes. That's all I possess. 7 boxes. That's it."
I can relate to that. I've moved 35 times. I don't think I have that many possessions anymore.
You also move a lot.
Yeah, I think it was my freeze response. It's the way that I've come to keep myself up. For me, there's been too many temptations and moments of my life where I dip down. And so I keep momentum underneath me like a conveyor belt. And I do find change very, very stimulating. Like if I picture my ideal life, it is moving from country to country, having a steady base somewhere, but having my center be me and then discovering the color and the creativity of life. That for me is just, I mean, if I was invited on retreat after retreat as a facilitator, that would be my bliss. I love it. Absolutely love it. And I don't find that there's anything lacking in that. I tend to feel very safe in that. I feel safer when I'm moving and I'm out in the world than I do when I'm here on my own, which is probably why you told me I had to get used to being alone. It's the flip side.
I try to also be okay to be alone. And of course, I love leading groups, and I like to interact with people and also to help people as much as I can, because after so many years, of course, you have a certain capacity. And I love that. I love the engagement also, even though sometimes it can be, it's also a lot, but I enjoy it. I also like when you have to be out of the group room and there's just nothing. You're not in the group room. People project onto you, and you're somebody that you're not. It's a projection, and I'm very aware of that. And of course, if you're very narcissistic, you would love that and I think that's you. And that's why I always go, you have time off from the program and then walk in the woods and sit around and be stupid and whatever. Just be yourself. It's important to get away from that projective thing and find your own place. Have friends that talk to you normal and whatever, cook for you. Just like that. Simple things. I love that. But I need always both. If you get lost in that narcissistic thing from group leading, what some people get lost in, I think you make you use the energy that people give to you for your own aggrandizement. And I think I always feel that's it's not good for your being or for your soul.
Yeah, from the perspective of how you treat them, it has a big impact. But also, I think from the perspective of how easy it is then to sit with your own tenderness, vulnerability, humility, to trust another person, to see your insides, it becomes really difficult to do that if you are entranced by receiving a certain level of power from others. I've definitely noticed that. Well, I suppose I've noticed two things. One is that in a sort of magical, mystical way, the people that are the most magnetizing actually are the ones that don't want to be a projection for you. So there's something about someone who stands in a level of self-presence that doesn't buy into the power play that would be so easy in the role of leader. That for me becomes a very compelling, beautiful thing to witness and to be around. And the purity of it is very different. And I can sense it. And it's not that I'm not still attracted to people that are in quite an expressed social form of power. I still find it quite tantalizing. But does it feel safe? No. So I start to feel the difference in my body. My body feels both excited by them and scared of them at the same time. And if that's happened, I know that that's not a person for me that I can really afford to lean into too much because it's like a fix. Somebody else's power can be like a fix in the same way that our own can. And I think that that's the other side of the danger is if you, as the facilitator, get too used to being that person to somebody, A, you're likely to be kicked off your pedestal at some point by that same person. The degree of their devotion to you will also be the degree of your downfall. Um,
Hopefully, hopefully.
Hopefully, exactly. But also I think you hold yourself to a level of expectation that becomes really unhealthy. Like the same as you, for me, I mean, the dream of me coming home and someone like cooking sausage and mash for me, and me getting into my pajamas and like
Yes.
it's just it's absolute bliss. It's nectar. It's the softness of life when we don't have to be
Yeah,
anything.
yeah, yeah. It's just that normality and where you can be yourself and you don't have to be God knows who, what, it's a projected place. It's not yourself. And I think part of the work is to bring those projections back also to ourselves. We just did a whole exercise here with projection. We project constantly out onto the world, onto politician, onto the Israeli, the Russians, the Palestinian, call everybody out, 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 but nobody's looking at themselves, really. What does that has to do with me, I'm not only a victim, I'm also a perpetrator. And we have to own that. And that's the work, and that I find that interesting, to look at that. But I have to own both sides in myself. Otherwise, I never, I will never come to a full maturity in myself. That is always projected out onto the other.
It feels like it's also related to what you were talking about before of women thinking that they need to be in service and the good girl. And I would say one of the most useful shifts for me was realizing that I was rather uglier than I thought that I was in terms of my emotional range, in terms of the thoughts that I was having about other people. There was something actually quite powerful about discovering, oh, I'm angrier and I'm stronger and I'm more jealous and I'm more resentful than I thought. And I get to be that. I don't have to reject that either. It doesn't mean I'm going to be acting from that. But it was quite beautiful to embrace that darker side of me and to therefore feel the similarity between me and so many other people in the world, everyone in the world, arguably.
Yeah, I'm all for looking into the dark side and seeing, what I can bring back home. It's not only negative, it's also positive stuff. Some people only have their darkness out there, but some people also have their love, their beauty, their intelligence out there. Same. But I think that's the work, and that's the work that we do in Path of Love. You have to bring the shadow side home, otherwise I don't think we're going to make any difference in this world unless we really say, you know what, it has to do with me. It's my stuff, it's my darkness, it's my anger, my hatred, my love, my beauty also.
Yeah, it means you stop being a victim.
Yeah. And that is not easy. People love being victims, you like to go, oh, everybody did this to me and poor me. But we got to come out of that and really own up who we really are. We're such wonderful, amazing, unbelievably big beings, that God works through. Well, we have to own our stuff, we're not just goody goodies. Thank God.
So Turi is recording this from a beautiful little cabin in Sweden, and she showed me the water that's sitting outside of her windows and her porch. And you mentioned that that there's nothing quite like it for you of just being here, the simple life. You don't need anything to be unordinary. And one of the themes of yearning or themes of suffering that seems to be so present in maybe this is just a London context or maybe this is the world around is that feeling of not enoughness. I'm not enough. It's not enough. You're not enough. And I guess I wonder what your take is on that after 50 years healing people's insides. What is your lens there?
Well, then how I see it, and then I don't know, you maybe see it differently. What not enough is usually is like a it's like a critical voice that comes in and puts you back into the safe place of your family. There you were unworthy, you were part, but if I belong, I have to sacrifice my beauty and my power and my strength and my gloriousness. I have to fit in. I have to be nice, and mom is more than I am, so I'm unworthy and blah 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 blah. And then that voice comes in as critic all the time. So every time we move a little bit out of that, the critic comes in and says, "Ooh, you're not enough. Watch out. This is going to end horribly." Yeah. And then we go, "Oh," and then we shrink back to that old space that we hate, but we're comfortable. It feels safe in a negative way. And so many people live like that. It's kind of, okay, everything is okay. I don't feel particularly interesting, but it's safe. Yeah. And then you go drinking and watching TV and dull your senses so you can stay in that state of being. And I think that's how I see that unworthiness. And anyway, women have it's so much. It's over centuries of unworthiness, of serving and being a mother, and I give everything to you. How many centuries have we give everything away? What would happen if we would really own our intuition? Women have a strong intuition, but we don't own that because then, 100 years ago, we were all burnt on the pile in the middle of the village. Yeah, because you had some particular capacity, you were a shaman or a healer. Yeah, most women are afraid of that, so it's like you come out a little bit and then, oh, 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 because you're going to get punished for that. And there's again that thing in there, stay who you are, stay small, stay unworthy, be happy you got a guy, no matter how idiotic the guy is, just stay in. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but that's how I see it.
I love that. I love that. It's like you better play by the rules or else, which touches on what you said before, which is that when you can come into a group with women, it's very profound because essentially then that becomes a relearning. A women are trustworthy. Women will be comfortable with me being at my full scale, my full size. Like I love the people in my life where I can be really big, and they are just cheering me on. And it wasn't my experience as a small person. I don't think it is for most people.
Yeah, it was not most of our experience. You learn to serve and to be nice and to be a goody goody girl. And then if you really trust that intuition, it's such unbelievable stuff that comes through. I get all my intuition through that, but I have to, of course, be quiet and have to listen to myself. Mostly we don't listen, we're so busy, blah, 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 but you have to really listen to yourself. And then the most amazing things come through. And then do I really trust that? Yeah. Or do I just say, oh God, better not, and yes, or too much, and well, do better. That's again that, go back to your old thing. But we
Yeah.
have amazing things. So many women have that intuition, but we don't value it. We don't trust it.
Well, I think it also brings us right up against the squeezy point for most human beings, which is that their capacity to be with the unknown is very tentative. I, even if I think about examples of people that I work with, or even in my own life, when we have a clear intuition, if it's strong enough, then for me, I will follow it. No hesitation. I knew that I was meant to come on retreat with you. I know the decisions that I know, I just know. I also, though, have intuitions, very strong intuitions about what's happening in the future. And what stops me from acting according to those intuitions is that the rest of the picture of how it's all going to work is not yet clear. And because my mind is desperate to understand how it's all going to work so that I don't lose anything that I feel that I might be detrimented by for losing, then I stall. And I see this again and again and again that people know, they have a knowing, and then knowing includes a feeling that it's all kind of going to be okay because it kind of always is. We're all right here. Like it is okay now. But because we want to have it all pinned down in an Excel spreadsheet, tabbed by month and date, we stop. We stop when we should move.
But what comes in is the fear to really come out, and then the fear is somebody's going to bite your head off, something terrible will happen. That is the female, our lineage, yeah, what we all learned as healers or as witches or bitches, you know, mostly as witches, and healers. There was no space. There wasn't valued. You had to be a mother or you were a wife. Yeah, mom, you be okay. Mom is like holy, holy, holy. But oh, you were a good wife. I think that's a big, big point. And I always think women have so much to offer, but we don't trust it. You're afraid. You're afraid that if I know, like you said, if I know the outcome, yes, but if I don't know what the outcome will be, ooh, just wait a little bit. Might be a disaster.
And it's so silly because whenever you let yourself go into the unknown, the outcomes are extraordinary. I mean, even in my own examples of when that's happened, it's just been sublime, unbelievable spontaneity and surprise and connection and joy and pain and surprise. All of the things that I consider to be vital, they're the fruits of life that make life worth living. And that actually reminds me of one of the things that I think will probably be a fair statement about humanity, which speaks to your point about functionality, which is I think if you would sit most people down and really ask them, do you feel that life is deeply, deeply, richly worth your time and your investment? Are you really excited about, enthused about this lived experience? I suspect a lot of people, if they were really honest, would not say that they were, partly because fear and stress have become such a commonly held tendency. Whereas I feel like what you're describing, especially at this stage in your trajectory, is if we go back to that preciousness thing, there's so much here. There's so much here if we can clear through the things that really we shouldn't really be carrying along with us anymore anyway.
So many people are in trouble right now, financially, emotionally. It's poverty all over. The prices are rising. I mean, there is a lot of people under incredible stress. And under stress, you can't do anything. It just doesn't work. You're just like nervous, nervous. The next bill, who's going to pay, who's not going to pay. It's a terrible thing. Under stress, nothing happens. You just become angry or, alcoholic, mostly druggy, just to calm down a little bit the nervous system. And that's a difficult place to be in. People are really highly traumatized without noticing how big that trauma is. We only started in the 90s to talk about trauma. Trauma didn't exist in the 80s. Trauma was like, what are you talking about? You just say yes and whatever. But it's only now, and now that really it's more common knowledge that there is trauma, there's a way to regulate your system, and so everybody kind of understands a bit more. But it wasn't like that.
And that sounds like that's your calling, that it feels like that for you, or at least teaching around that or bringing greater awakening.
A lot of people I meet, of course, they have gotten a lot of trauma, and then you have to work through those basic things to even come to the place where people then come into what is God trying to create through you. That's what I'm most interested in, even in people. What is, God is manifesting through me, through you, through all of us. And what is he going to manifest through us? What am I here for? We're all here for something. I'm 100% sure about that. And what is that? And even if it's just that you plant a garden in North Sweden and you have whatever comes out of that garden, some tomatoes and some broccoli maybe. Even this, you take care of nature, you're doing something.
What am I here for is such a beautiful question. If people don't know, if you ask someone that question and they say, well, I don't know what I'm here for, where would you suggest that they go? How do they start to find out that purpose?
Well, I always ask people, what are you really passionate about? There's always something that people love. Even their dentist, but they said, I love painting, yeah, or I love gardening. There's always something that people really love dearly and deeply. And then just to give that a little bit more space, or when we love something, we start to relax, we are here. When we're stressed out, we have to make a lot of money. We're all like, we're like in a tight jacket.
Yeah, and it does not make you happy when you redirect yourself toward the things that seem like a good idea.
My work is more to help people towards that point of light. What is that shines in you? Once people find that and they shine, then their life will go by themselves. Once you do something that you love dearly, deeply, the rest will happen by itself.
Mm.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you have to work something special. Some people love to be mechanics. It's great. Your parents told you you should be a doctor or something. No, you love simple work. So it's also beautiful. It's nothing wrong. So it's just how to put that in perspective. Then I think once you do something that you love dearly, deeply, the life will change. You might not have a lot of money, but at least you have a happier heart. Some basic sound is like, I'm here for that. I think we all have to find that. It's essential.
It's you used a gesture at the beginning of this recording. It sort of felt like talking about wholeness or integration or sort of alignment. And I think it's that you're talking about, that when we're really tuned into that thing that we adore, for me, it's being with people, being with
Yeah.
people.
You was very clear. You said you love to do it, and then you do it. And then also everything comes, the life helps you, it happens.
And sharing love for me is huge.
Even that, to allow other people to feel well. For me, welcome is one of those big words. I use it a lot in guided meditation. I never felt welcome. So of course I make people feel welcome. Yeah. Such a big word. Many people never felt welcome. They don't know why they're here.
And as a legacy, that's a very beautiful one to leave the world with. You
Yeah.
know, even if it's just 10 people that you've allowed to feel welcome in life, that's a ripple. That's like having children. I think that's where I get to with it is that is for me, that is, I have created better in a life than before I got there. I've taught people that they can love and that they can love themselves as a critical part of that. I would say that that is my mission.
And how beautiful is that, no? Couldn't there be anything more beautiful, even if it's one person?
Yeah, I'll take one. I'll take one. Yeah, absolutely.
That's fine, just to, okay, I have something to share. We all have something to share, but we have to come to that place where we're not totally in that prison of our conditioning and of our mind and our concepts. And that's work. That's what we do in Path of Love. That's what we do in the groups. You help people to come out of that imprisoned space of fear and scarcity.
Turiya, I'm really aware of your beautiful time. I do want to say for anyone that's been listening, that's been inspired by this magical woman, Path of Love happens all over the world. It is led by some incredible facilitators. If you're really lucky, you'll get the co-founders Turiya and Rafia leading your group. But I mean, even if you're not with them, I know how profound that experience is. So we're going to make sure that everyone has all of the details of Path of Love in the show notes. Turiya also runs her own incredible counseling training across the course of a year, hosted in some beautiful locations across Europe. And she also does essence trainings, which are building on Sufi mysticism and does a lot of work with women. She's in all of the places and spaces. So if she was hidden to you before today, please let her not continue to be. And if you have any questions about that, you can direct them to us at the podcast and we will pass them across to her. I just want to say, my love, thank you so, so much for being with us. It's such a treat for me.
It's just wonderful to meet you. I feel like we just meet from heart to heart, and then it just goes into some beautiful, expansion. And I love that. Much, much love. And thank you so much.